Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last few years. They are still a relatively new addition to the Swedish beer scene, but in that short time they have built a very good reputation for themselves, and it's quite rightly justified based on my previous experiences. But the beers that these guys are best known for, I would say, are the different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs. But in more recent times, they've been experimenting with different lagers and things, and doing them pretty well, I have to say. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases through Systembolaget. It's a style that I haven't tried from them before, but a style that I do very much enjoy. So I'm quite curious to see what their interpretation of it is going to be like. So, needless to say, very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head north to Örebro, which is just out to the west of Stockholm, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Apex Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Helles Sommarbier. It comes in at 4.8% ABV, and as the name suggests, this one is a German-style Helles lager, which is a blonde lager. But yeah, this beer was released through Systembolaget here in Sweden as part of the Tillfälligt temporary assortment for, at the very beginning actually, of June 2023. So yeah, we've had a couple of lagers from these guys before, the Keller Märzen, the Keller Lager, I think, did we have the Keller Dunkel yet, if I remember correctly as well. But yeah, some really interesting sort of Keller style yeasty type lager beers from Apex in recent times, and this one seems to be the latest addition to their lager range, so hopefully it's as good as the other ones that we've had before. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what it's all about. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Apex Brewing Company already, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go into the homepage, use the search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like in there. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Swedish playlist along with a number of other things, and that is of course being added to very, very regularly. But yeah, check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, but we'll go on now to tell you a little bit about Apex Brewing Company. So, Apex Brewing, as I've told you before, were originally based in Nora, which is to the north of Örebro, which is out to the west of Stockholm itself, but the company was founded back in 2017 by Daniel Gatchitz and Niklas Lundgren. So both of these guys are musicians, with Niklas having played in the band 59 Times the Pain, and Daniel played in a band called Voice of a Generation. But Daniel and Niklas are responsible for the brewing operations of the brewery, but there are a few others involved in there as well. This is Leif Karlsson, Ola Eriksson and Roger Helm, and these guys largely take care of the business side of things. But they started off with a 500 litre brew kit and 6 fermentation tanks, and they were just selling their beers in the local area before they got them into Systembolaget, and I believe I reviewed the very first one from one of the first releases a few years ago actually. That was the single hop a Citra New England double IPA, if I remember correctly. Otherwise it could have just been a single IPA, not 100% sure about that. But over the course of 2018 they brewed around 35,000 litres of beer over of the year, with 25 different varieties, all of which were New England hazy IPAs, and the following year in 2019 they brewed around 120,000 litres, and they were still sticking to brewing different kinds of New England hazy. But over the next few years they continued to develop more recipes, they expanded the brewery infrastructure, and in the summer of 2021 they announced that they would move to a new premises in the Baytorp district of Örebro that autumn. But at this point they upgraded their 500 litre brew kit to a new 2,000 litre system. They added several new tanks in there, and they've been continuing to expand the brewery infrastructure with more tanks and things ever since. But because of that expansion, they have been able to get their beer out and across Europe a little bit more. They've built up their network and things like that, and they are doing very well. But in more recent times, as I said, they have been experimenting a little bit more with lagers and things like that. They've got their Keller Lager series, which is pretty good, and I would recommend you check out. And they also brewed their first West Coast IPA recently as well. But as of June 2023, when I'm reviewing this particular beer for you, these guys have produced 160 or so different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and that will no doubt continue to increase as time goes on. But yeah, that's everything I can really tell you about Apex Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, that's that. So let's go on and actually have a little look at the beer itself. So as I mentioned to you at the start of the video, this one comes in at 4.8% ABV, and it's a German style Helles lager. The hops used in this one are Perl and Spalter, which are of course two quite well known German hops. Slightly higher alpha acid than the normal Hallertau or Tettnangers, which come in about 4.5%. Perl is about 5.5%. I think Spalter tends to give you a wee bit more at like 6% or something like that. But the malt base in this one is Pilsner and Carahel. So yeah, kind of interesting this one. I'm curious to see how close this is to being like an authentic German Helles lager, or whether it's going to be a more kind of crafty and a modern version actually. But yeah, we don't need the brewery notes anymore, so let's focus on the beer itself. I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on the can of this one before we open it up. So we'll just wipe the condensation of it, because it is very, very warm here in the Swedish summer. But as you can see, it's a 440ml can, plain silver top on this one here, and you can see we've got the usual music, people and beer thing, but you can also see we've got the usual artwork from an Apex lager, which is quite nice. You've got a sort of gargoyle type thing on this one, and it does of course tell you on the bottom that it is unfiltered. If memory serves me correctly, I paid about 35 Swedish kronor for this one, which is about €3.50, probably about £3.25 sterling, something like that, and maybe about $4 American, if you're interested in the exchange rates. But yeah, as I said, 4.8% Helles lager beer, this one. Let's get it out into the glass and see what it's all about. First lager from Apex Brewing in quite some time actually. So yeah, let's do this. So there we are. Let me see. So just line that up so that my OCD is happy, but you can see we've got a good little bit of this beer out and into the glass already. So as you would expect from a Helles lager, it's poured a lovely kind of bright blonde golden straw colour. You can see that if I hold it up to the camera, but we've got quite a little bit of head on this one, so it's obviously been sitting in the can for a good little while, about 1.5 fingers of a frothy, I would say, perfect white head. It's got a little bit of bumpiness up toward the top, and you can see some medium-sized bubbles in the middle, but a few foamier ones kind of in between that. I'm not sure how well you're going to see that on the camera there with the lights behind you, but yeah, it does look pretty damn nice, I have to say. I do like how this one goes together. But yeah, that head is just kind of fading away at the moment, and that will no doubt eventually become a nice kind of thin foamy layer. But one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass in this one, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of that head there. Overall, it does look pretty nice, as I say, and kind of what you would expect from the Helles lager. So like we said, a kind of blonde golden straw colour, this one. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determine your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, unless you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do, or any adjuncts you put in, will of course affect the colour of your beer as well. But yeah, when it comes to lager beers, you don't often have to care about adjuncts and barrel aging and stuff like this, to be honest with you, unless you're talking about like icebox and things like that. But yeah, certainly looks good, this one. A little bit of natural haze to it, but yeah, it is a pretty kind of clear, crisp looking lager actually. So yeah, let's have a wee look at the aroma of this one then and see what it's all about. Yeah, so it does smell very nice actually. It does smell pretty damn authentically German, which you would expect when it's Caramel and Pilsner malt, and then Spalter and Perla hops in this one. So yeah, that's not too much of a surprise, to be quite honest with you. And one of the things that I personally always look for in these kind of beers is that they are authentic and similar to what you would find in, say, the Brauhauses or from the German breweries. And this one really does smell like it's going to be that. It's got this very distinctive German bready character to it, the noble hops, and just that little bit of fruitiness. But yeah, remember the definition of a Helles lager is of course a blonde lager. The Czechs tend to call this style the Svetli, actually, but they are very kind of similar. The Pilsner, of course, is a different style because it's more hoppy and crisp and dry and things. But yeah, the German Helles and the Czech Svetli are kind of analogues of each other, to be honest with you. But yeah, certainly looks the part, this one, but we'll break down the aroma and just describe that for you a wee bit more in depth. And of course, remember the technical definition of a lager is a beer that undergoes low temperature fermentation using a bottom fermenting yeast. So yeah, usually lagers will ferment between 8 to 12 degrees Celsius. But yeah, this smells absolutely lovely. To break it down for you, the backbone of this beer, you've got a lovely little bit of that kind of fresh white bready bread crust. Think of like a hedgehog roll in there. That comes across really nicely. So yeah, fresh hedgehog roll in this one. A little bit of an almost kind of like, it's almost like it's straight fresh out of the bakery. You've almost got a little bit of that kind of floury dryness coming out of it. There's a wee touch of woody character in there to this one. So yeah, a little bit of a woody character to this one. Some nice crackery notes as well, which I think are very, very good. Yeah, I get quite a lot of crackery character out of this one. So as I say, you've got the bread crust, a little bit of woodiness, Jacob's cream cracker, then you've got that kind of wholemeal, brown bready note coming out of this one. Yeah, the way that that goes together is really, really very nice. Yeah, so yeah, a little bit of a wholemeal, kind of brown bready sort of thing coming out of this one. On top of that, you've got a little bit of a kind of white bready character coming out of the beer. So yeah, it's a little bit of a fluffy kind of white bready sort of thing in there. And yeah, so it's interesting just how much kind of brown bread you get out of this beer though, because normally you will get a little bit of it in a wholemeal. You will get a little bit of that in a kind of Helles lager, but it kind of lingers there and comes out a wee bit more into the you know, the more that you smell of the aroma, to be honest with you. I was about to say the aftertaste there. We haven't tasted the thing yet. But yeah, wholemeal brown bread, fluffy white bread on top of that, and then you start to get a little bit, you do get a little bit of the dryness and crispness from the Pilsner malt, but then absolutely above that you have a little bit of a more kind of brown sugary note in there. So it's interesting because the brown sugary character is kind of quite dry and leathery, to be honest with you, which I wasn't, in some way you would kind of expect that from Caramel, but there's obviously, you can even tell from the colour of this one, that there's not too much Caramel in this, because otherwise you'd have a slightly more amber leaning colour, I would think. But yeah, you certainly get a little bit of that dry, almost leathery kind of Werther's Original brown sugary character coming out of this one. On top of that, a little bit of sweet McVitie's digestive biscuit, wee touch of you do get a wee tiny bit of a straight up caramel in this one, but yeah, a little bit of caramel, a little bit of McVitie's digestive biscuit, and then you've also got a little bit of you have got a little bit of a more what would you say? Yeah, you have got a little bit of a more kind of just that leathery kind of brown sugary note under this one, which is interesting, I have to say that for sure. So yeah, on top of that, I would say the more that you smell this beer, you definitely get a little bit of that kind of woody character coming out of it, which is quite nice, and that does build up the further into the aftertaste that you go with this beer. I would absolutely say that. Or the more that you smell of this one, I would say, the more that your nose adjusts to the beer is probably a better way to say that. On the hoppy side of things, though, it is kind of what you'd expect from the German noble hops. I mean, you've got a nice little bit of yeah, you do have a nice little touch of kind of You've got a little bit of a kind of smooth earthiness coming out of this one. Absolutely. So yeah, a little bit of smooth earthiness in there. You've got a little touch of herbal character as well, but not too much. Then you get that nice bright floral aromaticity of this one. German hops for me tend to have a little bit of smoothness to them, but they're also quite bright in that sense. You get that nice bright floral aromatic character out of it. Then you get the brighter and slightly more zesty grassy character as well. But yeah, the way this one goes together is really quite nice in that sense. Yeah, aroma-wise, it does go together quite nicely actually. So yeah, a little bit of an earthiness in there, a little bit of a herbal character, and then above that you just get a little bit of fruitiness. So for me the fruitiness is kind of what you would expect from such a style. There's a little bit of a there's almost a little touch of like gooseberry note out of this one, or like a juicy lime. So yeah, a little bit of gooseberry, a little touch of lime, and you've also got wee touches of like kind of oily pear or sultana in this one, especially when you sugar the beer up a little bit. You get more of an oily pear or sultana type thing coming out of this one. So yeah, the way that goes together is quite nice. But like I say, a little bit of gooseberry, a little bit of lime, and yeah, the way that goes together I think is pretty interesting. That, yeah, for me it does go together pretty nicely actually. The way that this beer pieces together is very, very nice. There's a few, like I say, this is a more, gives you a bit more woodiness, a bit more brown bready character and things than other Helles lagers that I've come across before, but the fruity and hoppy side of things is pretty much what you would expect. And initially when I first smelled it, it was really quite, it did come across like very, very authentic, but it's nice. It does come across very nicely, but that is one of the things I have found with the Apex lagers so far, is that they do tend to have a little bit more of a kind of interesting sort of farmhousey, yeasty type character to them. So I'm curious to see whether this one carries on in the same vein in the flavour. But as I always say, take a bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time that we have a taste of this one and just see what it's all about. So yeah, let's do this. Very curious about this one. Let's have a go at this beer. This one is the Helles Sommarbier, a 4.8% Helles lager from Apex Brewing Company in Örebro, just out to the west of Stockholm here in Sweden. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah, it's pretty nice. And to be honest with you, this is one of these beers that tastes exactly as you would expect it to based on the aroma. Yeah, it really does. But yeah, I'm going to say this is quite a nice, drinkable beer, this one. And it's interesting because it seems that Apex are going, they're trying to almost make their own sort of, they're trying to put their own brand, I think, on some of these lager beers. And it really is quite interesting. So yeah, I do like how that. I do like how all this pieces together. Needless to say, it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah. So where do we start with this one? I'm going to say straight away, it gives you the wee bit of yeastiness you'd expect from an Apex Brewing lager. It has a nice little bit of kind of hoppy character to it as well, for sure. And then you've also got you've also got a nice little bit of kind of sweetness in the malt base, the breadiness and a bit of fruitiness as well. This beer gives you everything you would want from the style actually, so no surprises there, and Apex kind of deliver on this one. But yeah, let's break it down and just describe the beer a little bit more in depth, as we always do with these things. So we'll start in the middle third of the palate as usual. So, yeah, middle third of your palate then, you can feel that nice kind of fresh, white bready bread crust just forming the back of the beer. And what you will see is that the further into the aftertaste you go, the the drier the drier the beer gets, actually. So yeah, that's really quite interesting with this one. So yeah, lovely little bit of kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there, and it just gets drier and drier the further into the aftertaste that you go. But yeah, further forward on that middle third of the palate, you do get a little touch of a more yeah, you do get a little bit of a more kind of wood. There is a little touch of woodiness in this one too. So yeah, there is a little bit of that more woody character in this one, and that lingers into the aftertaste well, but it does give the beer a wee bit of a smoothness, actually. But then above that bread crusty character, you can feel there is a layer of like a kind of Jacob's cream cracker sort of thing, and this is something that you quite commonly get with these Apex lagers. And then above that, you have a kind of wholemeal, brown bready character coming out of this one. You can feel that there, and it's got a slight dryness to it, actually, which is kind of interesting. And above that, you've got the layer of you've got that more fluffy white bready layer coming out of the beer, which I think is quite nice. So yeah, the brown bready layer and the fluffy white bready layer coming out of this one, I think, is really quite nice in that sense. So yeah, brown bready layer, fluffy white bready layer, and the fluffy white bready layer has actually got a little bit of sweetness to it, which builds up the further into the aftertaste that you go. But on top of the white bready layer, you can feel a little bit of the caramel coming out in this one. So you have this kind of almost leathery layer of like Werther's original butter candy, butterscotchy level kind of sweetness. But if you go to the dead centre of your palate, you can feel that little circle there where you've got the oily, sweet caramel coming out of this one. And as you move further out from that, you get a little bit of a kind of Werther's original butter candy, butterscotch type flavour. And then as you push out toward the edges of that middle third of your palate, you have a little bit more of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing to it as well. So yeah, the way this goes together, I think, is really quite nice. The malty character, you do get more and more of the sweetness the further into the aftertaste that you go as well, but you still have that bread crusty, I think it's the more bread crusty nature of this one underneath us, that kind of lingers, and more of the woodiness as well that comes out into the aftertaste. But I think, in honesty, that definitely describes the middle third of the palate quite well. Let's have a little look at the back third of your palate then. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, again, you get a nice little bit of that kind of brown bready and white bready build up in there. You can feel that, and above that you start to get the kind of dryness from the Pilsner malt coming out of this one, and that of course lingers into the taste as well. So this beer, as a Helles lager, it does have a wee bit more Pilsnery dryness and a little bit more kind of brown sugary sweetness than you may normally expect from a Helles lager, to be honest with you. But that's still quite interesting. Back third of the palate, as I always say, you quite often get similar flavours, but they just come out in different intensities, and you can definitely see that with this beer, of course, as well. So yeah, the back third of the palate, the base of this one, that bread crusty character, is a little bit drier. It is a little bit more bitter, of course, as well. Remember, more bitter and dry flavours come out further back on the palate, generally speaking, whereas sweeter and more fruity flavours come out further forward. But yeah, kind of dry bread crusty sort of thing on this one. A little bit of a kind of Jacob's cream cracker coming out on top of it as well. Then you get that wholemeal brown bready character, then a fluffy white bready kind of layer coming out of this one too, which is quite nice. So yeah, and you can feel the brown bready and the white bready layers are just a little bit taller and more airy for sure. But yeah, the way that this beer goes together is really quite nice in that regard. So yeah, interesting stuff for sure. On top of that, you have on top of that though, you do feel a little bit of the Pilsner malty dryness just kind of creeping on top of that white bread, and that gives you the bit of dryness the further into the aftertaste that you go. And then above everything else, you have more of the, you can feel the kind of farmhousey, yeasty character coming out of this one. And for me, the sort of farmhousey and yeasty characters you get from these Apex lagers are a little bit of a trademark, to be honest with you. So yeah, you have this airy, kind of farmhousey, woody, crackery, bready sort of thing in there. There's a little bit of there is a little bit of a more there's a little touch of a kind of woody, there's a little bit of an almost honeycomb type quality coming out of this one, and I always get honeycomb on the back third of the palate for some reason. But yeah, you can feel that farmhousey, woody, crackery bread with just a little bit of honeycomb kind of wrapped around it. And yeah, like I say, I think that goes together pretty well in this one. It's quite interesting. So yeah, you can feel the back third of your palate, the flavour is definitely taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, the flavour just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit. So yeah, that's quite interesting. So let's look at the hoppy side of things then. So the hoppy side of the beer, for me, hoppy wise, this beer, in the back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, you get a little touch of herbal character, and as you push toward the kind of front corners of the tongue, you get a little bit more of a kind of floral, aromatic sort of thing going out of this beer. So yeah, and this beer actually does give you a little bit of bitterness the further into the aftertaste you go with it as well, which is interesting. So yeah, a little bit of earthiness in there, a little bit of herbal character, and as you move further forward, you've got more of that kind of floral aromaticity out this one. And it does have a wee bit of brightness to it as well, in fairness, which I find quite interesting. But round the front curve of the tongue, it's definitely a little bit lighter, a little bit more kind of grassy and things. So there's not really a zestiness to this one. It is more of a kind of slightly wet, fresh cut grass type thing that comes out of this one. But yeah, I like how that goes together. But yeah, hoppy wise, it's kind of what you would expect from any Helles lager. But yeah, let's have a wee look at that front third of the palate then. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a kind of, yeah, you get a little bit of that sort of brown and white bready build up in there. It's got a little bit of dryness, but then yeah, you've got a little touch of you do have a little bit more of a kind of bread crusty base in there, a little bit of Jacob's cream cracker again, then brown bread and white bread. You can feel all those layers underneath the front third of your palate. Then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. But yeah, the way that goes together is pretty nice actually. Yeah, interesting stuff. So at the back, if we look at that fruity side of things then, if we go to the back of that front third of your palate, it's kind of what you'd expect. There's a little bit of that sort of, you know, sultana, dry, white, green, grapey quality in there. So you get a wee bit of that. Then as you move further forward into the middle of that front third of your palate, it becomes a little bit more of a kind of oily pear type quality of this one. So yeah, you've got that nice kind of more oily, peary character coming out of the beer. Then as you move into the kind of front half of that front third of your tongue, there's a little bit more kind of, yeah, you've got a little bit more of, how would you say, you start to get a wee bit of a more limey character out of this one, which I find quite interesting. I think that's probably most likely to be from the Spalter, to be honest with you. You get a bit of lime in the base and a little bit more of a kind of fresh green apple above that. I don't get so much of the gooseberry that I was getting in the aroma, but I think definitely on the fruity side of things, as we say at the back, you've got a little bit of sultana, In the middle you get a little bit of an oily pear, then as you move further forward you get a little bit more kind of juicy lime or something like this. So yeah, the way that the beer goes together in that particular sense is quite interesting actually. So that gets a thumbs up from me, I have to say. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for the flavours in this beer. I think we've described everything we really need to. So overall, quite a bread crusty and grainy, leaning Helles on the malty side of things. A little bit more hoppy character than the usual fruits actually. But yeah, interesting beer, this one. It's an interesting Helles beer, but it has that kind of trademark Apex farmhousey yeasty character to it, which I find quite interesting. Yeah, so mouthfeel wise then, to round off this review, definitely light bodied, at the top end of light bodied I would add. So yeah, top end of light bodied for me. Carbonation is very, very smooth. It has got a little bit of, it does have a little bit of that wetness and light drinkability that you want from the style, but as I say, it's quite a, it has got quite a little bit of that smooth yeasty character to it as well, so it's something you would always expect. In terms of the hoppy bitterness in this one, I'd say that this is maybe, I think it's got to be 25-ish IBUs, this beer, which is a wee bit on the higher side for a Helles, I think, but not uncommon. Usually these beers are about 20-ish IBUs, but this one just feels a little bit more bitter. Could just be the freshness, or it could be a part, attributed to by the yeast and things, making it a little bit drier. As I say, Apex lagers tend to be a little bit more farmhousey and yeasty and things, and you get that wee bit of dryness in there. So the malt base, for sure, has a bit of dryness underneath, a bit of smoothness in the middle, then a wee bit of sweetness, and then above that you've got a lovely little bit of kind of fruity character as well. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I think, is really very, very nice. Yeah, the way everything goes together in this beer is really quite interesting. So the fruity character, smooth and oily, but gives you a wee bit of kind of brightness and zestiness as well. Just a more yeasty, bread crusty and woody version of what you would get from a Brauhaus Helles, to be honest with you. It does have that little bit of Brauhaus rawness to it, which I do like about the Apex lagers. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This was the Helles Sommarbier, a 4.8% German Helles style lager from Apex Brewing Company in Örebro, out to the west of Stockholm here in Sweden. Let's leave it at that for this one. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Apex Brewing Company as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future. But until then, check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you guys in another review very, very shortly. Sláinte, skål, cheers, and catch you guys later.